In this day and age, it's very common for studios not to simply see films as solo offerings, but at what potential franchise they could get out of it years before anything might actually ever come to fruition. It's why we see companies like Marvel jotting out dates so far in advance that I might not actually live to see them all, because they want to plant seeds as far as they can and build hype every step in between. Yet 2018 hasn't exactly been a super smooth year for films, and as such there's been some very bitter pills to swallow along the way. So let's take a closer look and explore why some very big names have been chucked into some very deep graves. I'm Jules, your one per list wonder for whatculture.com, and these are 10 big movies that were cancelled this year and why. And speaking of franchises, if you want to check out the empire that I've been slowly building out of terrible comedy, then visit shop.whatculture.com, as my one per list t-shirts and having a draft tees are on sale at the moment with a bit of discount to boot. You are so very welcome.
Hey, just quickly to pop in before the list actually starts, I just want to talk to you about That Film Theory. If you don't know what that is yet, it's a brand new channel that's going to be about video essays, cinematic experiences, a bit more relaxed approach. Hopefully we'll see you there. You can find the details down below.
Number 10, The Raid. Gareth Evans delivered two of the finest action movies of the decade with The Raid 1 and 2, but 4 years on, and sadly, the trilogy isn't going to be reaching completion anytime soon. It was initially reported that The Raid 3 would take place before 2, with Evans saying that he hoped to film it back in 2018 after a break from martial arts movies. Well, he's had that break. He made the period horror Apostle for Netflix, but that has only moved him further away from The Raid. And when asked what was going on with The Raid, he told Cinema Blend, "At one point it was on my radar, I had a full idea, I know what the storyline would have been, but I think enough time has passed now that I'm not likely to go back and revisit it. We had a lot of fun making those films, and I think we came to a nice sort of natural conclusion with The Raid 2, and I think that sometimes you can have a little bit too much of a good thing." And then he added to Slash Film, "The Raid 1 and 2 were incredible for me, but I just didn't want to be doing the raids all the time. It didn't really appeal to me to jump back into that world again," which is a real shame. Number 9, Silver and Black. As part of Sony's plans for the now spiderless Spider-Verse, it was announced back in 2017 that Silver Sable and Black Cat were going to team up for a big screen outing titled Silver and Black. Originally slated to hit cinemas in February 2019, it was then pulled from the Sony release schedule in June because the director was unhappy with the script. Then in August, any hopes of seeing the film were flipped away.
Go! Go! Go, Webb, go!
As the film was canned completely. However, it's not all bad news, because instead we might get 2 films each being solo flicks for the Spandex Chicks. However, seeing as we don't yet have a word on a scriptwriter nor a director, things are, like my career path post What Culture, quite directionless. Number 8, The Crow remake. A remake of the Brandon Lee cult classic has been in various stages of development over the last 10 years, but things really got moving in 2016 when Jason Momoa signed on to star, with Corin Hardy set to direct. A year later, Sony had agreed to distribute the movie, but after some production issues, the involvement of Hardy and Momoa was in doubt. The pair then both departed the project, and it was revealed that Sony's distribution deal hadn't actually closed. With these financial and creative differences, there was no way the film was going to go ahead, and the remake has now been buried once more. However, much like the content of the flick itself, there's always a chance that it could come back once more to take revenge on all the Hollywood execs who've passed it over all these times. Number 7, The Silver Chair. Despite initially being a decent hit, the Chronicles of Narnia franchise saw diminishing returns across its 3 movies, leading to plans to completely reboot things, starting with The Silver Chair, which is the 4th or 6th book, depending on which order you go, which is weird, isn't it? It doesn't make sense when you think about it to start at the 4th or 6th book. Regardless of logic, plans pressed ahead with veteran filmmaker Joe Johnston signing on to direct last year, with The Silver Chair picking up decades after The Voyage of the Dawn Treader in Narnia, but only 1 year later in England. Very confusing, right? All of this now has been upended, though, by Netflix of all people, as it was announced this year that the streaming giant has purchased the rights to C.S. Lewis's series, with plans to make films and TV shows based on the works, which now means that your mum's fanny isn't the only deceivingly cavernous thing that will be on screens when Narnia and its wardrobe hits our platforms once more. There's my one per list. Number 6, Transformers 6. Although it's one of the most commercially successful film franchises of all time, with 2 entries somehow making over $1 billion, Paramount are pivoting away from the mainline Transformers series. The 5th and most recent entry, The Last Knight, made just $605 million at the box office, a little over half of what Age of Extinction brought in, which contributed to the sense of weariness around the franchise, and Michael Bay also promised that it'd be his last. But it might actually be the last overall too, with Paramount pulling Transformers 6 from its schedule this year. For any other film, this is still good money, but for Transformers, this isn't even enough to chip the paint. So instead, the studio have gone with the spin-off Bumblebee, which is aiming to be a completely different type of movie. Thank Christ. Number 5, City of Lies. Had everything gone to plan, then City of Lies, previously known as Labyrinth, but with the L-A capitalized, Grim, would have been released by now. The film would have starred Johnny Depp as LAPD detective Russell Poole, who investigates the murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. Originally slated for a September 2018 release, the film was only pulled in August due to an ongoing lawsuit between Depp and the movie's location manager, which then led to another lawsuit, this time by an Israeli bank who funded some of the project, for unpaid guarantees due to the release being shelved. With twin lawsuits, not to mention a constant swirl of controversy around Depp, there's no release date scheduled, and it doesn't look like seeing the light of day anytime soon. Number 4, Mad Max sequels. George Miller stunned us all with the explosive return of Mad Max back in 2015 and was discussing plans for a sequel almost immediately. Miller supposedly had ideas for 2 movies, one with a pretty bland title of Mad Max The Wasteland and the other likely to be a spin-off centering on Furiosa, most likely titled, Hot Rod or something such these terrible naming conventions. However, a lawsuit between Miller's production company and Warner Brothers led to a delay in production. The former is suing for unpaid earnings, and the latter accusing them of breaking a contract by delivering a 2-hour R-rated movie rather than the 100-minute PG-13 one agreed upon. Jesus! Could you imagine how lame that PG version would have been? It's Mad Max, not Mild Max. Things have taken a further hit, with Miller officially putting the sequels on hold as he instead turns his attention to working on 3,000 Years of Longing, which will star Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. Given that Miller has directed just 4 movies in the last 20 years, Mad Max is quite likely now cast out to the development wasteland.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Number 3, Boba Fett, A Star Wars Story. Lucasfilms have unofficially been trying to make a Boba Fett movie happen for years, and it's widely believed that it was the film that Josh Trank was working on before he was fired. However, Solo's relative box office failure, and I mean that only in the eyes of the Dark Emperor Disney who demands bills hand over fist, is going to cast doubts over the future of Star Wars stories, and then it was reported last month that Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy has confirmed the Fett movie was dead. Solo's performance knocked it off the sail barge, and Jon Favreau's in development The Mandalorian is what then sent it tumbling into the Sarlacc pit, where it shall stay and be digested and give the poor beast probably gas for thousands of years. Number 2, quite a lot of DC movies. Warner Brothers' plans for the DCEU, or Worlds of DC as they try to rebrand it to, have been in a state of flux for some time, with plans changing with each new setback, and that's meant that a number of films have been scrapped this year. Man of Steel 2, which has been shuffled off the slate and had Supergirl put in its place. Then there was Flashpoint, which isn't just the activity that I get up to on the weekend, but that's only just because it could make way for a solo Flash movie, which could actually be very nice. And then there's Deathstroke, which was reportedly going to be directed by Gareth Evans. That, however, was part of the initial plans for the DCEU under Zack Snyder, with Justice League setting up the Legion of Doom and Deathstroke set to appear in Ben Affleck's solo Batman movie, which is now Matt Reeves' movie and won't likely feature Batfleck at all. At this point, we do know that we're getting Aquaman, Shazam, and Wonder Woman 2 in the shared universe, but everything else is either scrapped, in question, or under a different umbrella. Brilliant. And number 1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So at the time of this recording, we have been awash with a ton of information about James Gunn and his tweet. Delve into that at your own leisure if you want. However, what I'm going to talk about is that it's meant that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has been shelved indefinitely, or at least Gunn's version of it, as the sequel probably will happen. However, it will probably be a totally different beast when it arrives. For example, Dave Bautista doesn't even want to do the film, and big old Kev over at Marvel has said that it's unlikely to be revived in the next few years. So while I began this list by talking about the plans that Marvel have had in place for the next 10 or 20 years, it's kind of interesting to be ending this list by talking about how one of their bigger franchises is now sitting in limbo. Because while you can set things in stone, someone else can just take a hammer to it. Just remember that. You might learn something. You're welcome.